The month is almost over, but before we move into June, we wanted to take a look back at a few government fleet stories worth revisiting. And this month, a lot of those stories came back to one theme. Public fleet leaders are being asked to prepare for more, communicate better, and make decisions that hold up under pressure. Nothing really new, but again, we keep talking about it, so I think it is worth a revisit. We'll start with a leadership story. We spoke with longtime fleet leader Larry Campbell about the human side of fleet management. And one thing that came through clearly in that conversation was that for him, fleet has never really been about vehicles, which, if you think about it, is interesting, but hear me out. It's always been about the people. He talked about accountability, integrity, trust, and the responsibility fleet leaders have to understand their operations at a deep level. So that means knowing the numbers, knowing the true cost of running the shop, and being able to defend the budget and the decisions and the people doing that work. Campbell also talked about technology, including AI, telematics, and dashboards. Again, things that are very prevalent in today's conversations. And his point was not that fleets should avoid these tools, it was that these tools are only as good as the information going into them. For example, if work orders are incomplete, or if meter readings are wrong, or if technicians are not clocking in and out correctly, then the reports are not going to give leaders a full picture. That was a good reminder that modernization does not start with software, it starts with discipline. And that idea of preparation showed up again in our story on power planning. So, this article looked at what happens when the grid goes down and a fleet has to keep operating anyway. The big takeaway was that a power plant has to work in real conditions, not just theory. During an outage, fleets may discover that their backup plan depends too much on one source. Maybe the generator is ready, but the fleet delivery can't get through. Maybe solar is part of that plan, but the weather is not cooperating. Or maybe batteries are available, but they weren't fully charged after the last use. So that's where redundancy does matter. And this story looked at the value of pairing battery storage with generator support, so adding actual power needs and testing equipment before an emergency happens. It also raised a practical point about power triage. Not every load needs the same level of support. So, radios, communication equipment, command posts, and EV rescue charging all have different needs, and fleets should know what gets priority before the pressure is on. Because when the power goes out, the goal is not to have a plan sitting in a binder. The goal is to have a system the team can actually deploy. We also looked at crisis communication for fleet leaders. Fleet teams are usually focused on the physical response during an emergency, and that makes sense. But communication is part of the response as well. So in this story, we talked with an expert who talked to us about the importance of having information and messaging ready before a crisis happens. That means fleet leaders should know where to find driver rosters, vehicle information, emergency contacts, maintenance records. I mean, it's a long list. You could go through all of it, but the important part is that they should also have a basic message template ready for likely scenarios. So whether that's a crash, a theft, severe weather, an employee injury, or another disruption. One of the strong points from that story was that the first questions will come fast. If leaders are spending the first hour trying to gather basic information or draft a statement from scratch, you could already be behind. The story also looked at the side of things where transparency does not always mean saying everything immediately. Fleet leaders need to verify facts first, avoid speculation, and make sure the right people are involved in the communication chain. A short holding statement can help establish control and trust early on, but guessing, assigning blame, or making definitive statements too soon can create legal and operational problems later. That same idea carried into another story we highlighted this month, which was compliance during disaster response. So when a disaster hits, fleets are focused on moving quickly, of course, and that includes keeping people safe and supporting the response, but that pressure can cause documentation and compliance to break down. This article looked at how issues can surface around hours of service exceptions, inspection documentation, asset tracking, and post-event record keeping. In many cases, the problem is not that someone ignored the rules on purpose. The problem is that the system was not built to flex under pressure. For example, a driver may have to stay on duty longer than usual during an emergency. A vehicle may be reassigned abandoned or repaired in the field, or a post-trip inspection may get missed because the priority in that moment is evacuation or safety. And those situations may be understandable, but fleets still need to be able to explain what happened and include why an exception was necessary, as well as how risk was managed. And as many fleets are aware, that's why training matters before an emergency. So you've got drivers, you've got technicians, and managers, a whole group of people who need to know what still has to be documented, as well as what can be adjusted during emergency. We'll also look at the other side of things about who owns the follow-up once operations start to normalize. And within that story, it was very important to look at the compliance and how it's not about slowing down the response, it's about making sure the response can stand up to review later. And finally, we took a closer look at the role public fleets play in wildfire response. And we know that wildfire preparedness is not only a fire department issue. Public fleets are part of the chain of response, and the fire demands on those fleets are growing. So if we're looking at general stats within the US, we know that peak fire season generally runs from May to October. But in some areas, especially on the West Coast, wildfire risk has become a much larger concern. So you've got hotter and drier conditions, fuel accumulation, urban growth into fire-prone areas, and unpredictable weather that have made wildfire incidents harder to predict, contain, and recover from. And that puts pressure on the entire response system. We spoke with a retired fire chief to talk about the importance of coordination, communication, and technology during these wildfire response times. But technology, as we know, is only part of the answer. The story also pointed to the need for stronger community preparedness, along with clear evacuation planning, workforce support, and cross-agency coordination. So for fleet leaders, this is just another reminder that emergency preparedness is not limited to having vehicles available. It's about making sure equipment, data, people, communications, and decision-making all work together when conditions are changing very quickly. So looking across all these stories, a common theme seems to be that for fleet leadership today, it's more than just keeping vehicles on the road. It's about building systems that hold up when things are uncertain. And that could have a range of different meanings for different fleets depending on your needs and where you're at. So that could mean protecting data quality before investing in new technology, all the way to just testing backup power before the next outage. So preparation is not one task, it's an ongoing responsibility. And while we're on the subject of preparation, GFX is almost here. The Government Fleet Expo and Conference is happening June 9th through the 12th at the Long Beach Convention Center, and it is not too late to register. If you work in public fleet, GFX is just a great chance to connect with other fleet professionals, get some educational insight from sessions, walk the exhibit hall, and of course, just take part in the conversations that are directly tied to the challenges public fleets are facing right now. So make your plans, get registered, and we'll see you at GFX.